Hey guys, this is Solomon. Hope you guys are having a great day. I thought in today's video I would show you some of my favorite gambits for white, and this is probably going to be more helpful for you E4 players. All 5 of the gambits covered in today's video follow the move E4, although one of them could be seen with the move of D4, which is actually the usual move order, okay? But we're going to transpose into it as white with E4 going against the Scandinavian. More on that later. But let's first cover, my favorite options against the move of E5, right? Now, of course, this video is not me saying these are the only gambits, especially against E5. I mean, there's so many different options in terms of gambits. I mean, even right now, we could immediately play the King's Gambit or the Danish Gambit with D4, right? Ton of different options. We have the Goring Gambit, all this different stuff, the Evans. But I personally am a big fan of the Scotch Gambit. I got to throw it back to my childhood. That was my childhood opening. And okay, I mean, it starts out with knight f3. We play d4, but instead of capturing the pawn back, we're playing bishop c4. The f7 pawn is the weakest pawn for black in the opening, and we're making it a point to put pressure on it right away. And okay, I mean, there's a lot of different moves that black can play here. We could see a move like knight f6. This bishop could move, right, to e7, c5, or b4. I would say one of the key ideas in the Scotch is to play the move of c3. Okay, now, by the way, every single, gambit that I'm talking about and kind of just introducing in this video, I have more full and in-depth videos on them. And I'll leave the links to those in the description below. So if you want to learn about one or more of these, you can just go check those videos out. But all that being said, to kind of introduce you to the idea, C3 is a very important move to get in a lot of lines, right? Knight f6, I would say, is the main line for black. Or if black really studies their theory against the Scotch, they're going to play that move knight f6. But that being said, a lot of players don't, right? Especially at those earlier levels. If a move like bishop e7, we're playing c3. A move like bishop c5, we're playing c3. And if a move like bishop e4 check, you guessed it, c3 again, right? Now, we're playing c3 to open up the position, right? Gain an advantage in development. In this case, we're taking back with tempo against the bishop, right? But I think one other advantage of playing the move of c3 is that we're opening up the b3 square for our queen. In this case, we can play queen b3, forming a battery ram against the pawn on f7. Knight h6 is not going to work because our bishop is just going to take it out, and then we're winning the pawn, right? Not to mention that black would have pretty terrible pawn structure over there. So here, if we see a move like queen e7, we're now playing the move of bishop a3. And this is just a really fun position to play. I mean, if you take the pawn on e4, we have rook e1, and we are pinning your queen to the king on e8. We're looking at e5 ideas in the future, trying to just bust the position open. And we got, 2 bishops and a queen. I mean, just active, aim towards the king side. This queen's also putting pressure on b7 if this bishop ever tries to run away. Natural development on the way here for white as well. And okay, there you go. You're playing fun attacking chess. Going back to the move of bishop c4, I did want to mention this line that I've seen and I've played against before of bishop e7. I don't think that this is a very great move for black, in all honesty, because we're playing c3. We're looking to capture back, on d4 potentially. And here if the move d takes e3, usually we're putting our queen on b3. But in this particular case, we're not playing queen b3, and we're actually not taking with the pawn or the knight. We're going to play queen d5, and you don't see this a lot in the Scotch Gambit because usually there's, a knight on f6 or a pawn on d6, aka bishop e6 would just block the queen. But in this case, neither of those are possible, right? We're simply threatening a mate in 1. And I actually had a game like this against a 1400 USCF player back in the day. He played this move of d6, and I simply won the game by taking and playing bishop e6, and the game was over, right? Against queen d5, there's only one move for black that gives them a survivable game, okay? Only one move that defends. I guess this also defends, technically, the pawn on f7, but we just take the knight, okay? The only move here for black is knight h6, which is pretty ugly. Let's just be honest, okay? Against this move, we're simply going to snatch that knight off, kind of reintroducing the threat of a mate in 1. And again, blacks, they got to figure something out here. Castling kingside is by far the best option. I would say here knight takes c3 is actually, the second best computer move, about a plus 0.5 advantage for white. So obviously not crushing or anything. Bishop takes g7 is just above that, just taking out that pawn and then capturing on c3 in that particular case. And okay, we're sitting at even material, but I would say that white has a, in terms of a practical advantage, black just has a king on g7. That's pretty open to attack, right? Not to mention some pawn structure issues. As white, we're going to be looking to castle. Black, on the other hand, they're probably going to be trying to play stuff like d6 and bishop e6, kicking our queen away. And we still got a good game of chess ahead, right? But that's one thing that you can kind of look at. So all that said, I think the Scotch Gambit is a fun system, especially for beginner players, and it is pretty sound, right? It kind of mixes both, right? It's sound, it's strategic, but it also has those fun trappy lines in it, right? Some gambits are all about, I'm winning by move 7, or I'm just, not in a great position. Some of them are very strategic and long-term thinking. I think the Scotch Gambit does a good job of kind of balancing both. So it's a fun system. And yeah, I recommend that you check out my video on it if you want to learn more about it and just try it out, right? One of the biggest things I could say to players trying to find an opening, don't get stuck. Okay, this is one of the mistakes I made, when I was playing in tournaments. I'd get stuck on an opening, and even if I didn't like it, I'd kind of just commit to it, right? It's not about what's the best opening. It's about what you like and what you're comfortable with. Now, next up, I have a proposition for you King's Gambit players. Okay, now, in all honesty, I don't think the King's Gambit is sound. Okay, now, going to the position here, the King's Gambit is this move of f4. Okay, and it's a lot of fun, but, even e takes f4, Stockfish gives black a sizable advantage. On top of that, there's the Falkbeer with d5, which is annoying. There's bishop c5, all that kind of stuff. If you're a little bit, tired of playing the King's Gambit against people that know their theory, but you still like that f4 idea, seeing in the Grand Prix and all those kind of systems, I recommend the Vienna Gambit. Okay, I think it's an improved King's Gambit. We're starting out with the move of knight c3, and here black could play the move of knight c6. Right, in which case f4 is possible, right? Bishop c4, d3, and then f4 is also possible, right? But all that said, I think knight f6 is a ton of fun to play against. In fact, f4, and I think this is, without a shadow of a doubt, just an improved King's Gambit because of the fact that this queen on d8 simply can't see anything, right? Queen h4 ideas are not going to be in the air if they take. If they take, they can't play g5 and have a queen supporting it. This knight's kind of in the way. It's not a bad minor piece, but it is in the way. On the other hand, we as white, we have this knight that is supporting the pawn on e4. And okay, f4 is feeling solid. And by the way, I have a lot of private students that I meet with on a weekly basis. If you're interested in trying to improve your chess, I would love to try to help you out and get you to that next level. There's a lot of different things that I do with my students. If you're interested, I have a link in the description. All that said, I can't tell you how many of my students play the Vienna Gambit and they see this move of e captures f4. Okay, I see it all the time. We're now going to play e5, and notice black has 4 squares the knight would like to move to, but they're all taken away. All of them, right? The central squares, as well as g4 and h5. And look, if you want to play something like queen e7, we're just going to play queen e2, and the knight's going to have to run back anyway. So, okay, knight g8. There's a lot of different moves here. I think the most popular online is knight f3, but I'm kind of a fan of the move of queen e2, right? Because if we try something like knight f3, d6 can be played, but now with the queen on e2, d6, trying to chip away at this pawn, we're just going to take it and have a check, right? Something like knight c6. Okay, we'll now play knight f3. You want to bring the bishop out. We're going to, try to chase that bishop around, advance in the center, look to capture off this pawn on f4, evening out the material with a huge space advantage. And if black now holds onto it with the move like g5, we're simply going to continue with d5, right? Trying to steamroll black in this game. See something like knight a5, centralize the queen. In this line in particular, we move the queen a lot, which I usually don't recommend in openings, but there are actually a surprising amount of lines in the Vienna Gambit / Vienna game where we move the queen multiple times, right? In general, you shouldn't throw the queen everywhere, but there are exceptions. This is one of them. And yeah, we're just, queen e4, nice edge here. Something like queen e7, d6 can happen, knight d5. Attacking the queen, attacking the pawn, a queen kind of facing the king directly, this knight attacking g5. There's just so much going on here, and black's in major trouble, right? So all that to say, extremely fun system for white, and it's very sound as well. Going back to e4, okay, so those are a couple of options that you can try against e5, the Vienna Gambit and the Scotch Gambit. What about this move of d5? Well, this is actually the line that I mentioned that d4 can be the first move with. In fact, it usually is, right? d4, d5, and then e4. We are now in the Blackmar Gambit, right? / Blackmar-Diemer Gambit. And after a couple of moves, basically what we're trying to do here is attack that pawn. Right, and if they accept the gambit, we're going to play knight c3 and then offer up a pawn on f3. Okay, black can take this. We'll just capture back with the knight. And there's a couple of different things that black can try to do here, but really I think the biggest decision that the Blackmar player has is what to do with this light squared bishop. Right, let's first take a look at this move of bishop g4. Okay, in this case we're actually just going to play h3, trade off. I mean, if you want, you could take my pawn on d4, but then we're going to win the pawn on b7 and say thank you for the rook. And okay, if black stops this, we're just going to develop, bishop e3. And okay, now e6. How do we know where to put the bishop in the Blackmar? And honestly, in a lot of e4 openings in general, if you see a pawn on e6, put the bishop on d3. If you see a pawn on g6, put the bishop on c4. And if you see a pawn on both e6 and g6, black has really weakened their dark squares, right? Why would I play bishop c4 here, right? Wouldn't that just kind of, the bishop kind of be limited? Only a couple squares. Let's put this bishop on a more active square where its scope is more far-reaching. Knight d7, we're now going to castle. And this is the kind of game that you're going to get in the Blackmar. It's not one of those openings where you're trying to win the game, again, in 7 moves, but you're just getting a huge edge in development. And, usually by giving up those E and F pawns, you're going to have, a battery ram here, a rook on the way, and, overall just fun attacking chess on both of those semi-open files, not to mention 2 bishops aimed directly at the king side of the board, right? Now going back after knight takes f3, bishop g4 could happen. If something like g6, again, we're not going to play bishop d3. Let's play bishop c4, right? Make this reach as far as we can. And I guess you could say it's the same number of squares in this instance, but I think f7 is a lot weaker here. Okay, something like, bishop g4 is not going to work. We're actually going to take on f7 with check and then knight e5 with check, winning that minor piece. And if bishop g7, okay, let's castle. And here there's kind of a Grand Prix attack type idea with queen e1 and queen h4, which is quite a bit of fun. Something like bishop g4 is played. We can kind of start transferring a knight over. If you want to take, that's fine. We're going to play c3, really just trying to hunker down and stabilize that pawn on d4. And yeah, I mean, we're, nice little edge in activity, I think. The bishop's active, the rook, the queen, even the bishop on c1 hasn't moved yet, but it's still pretty active, attacking dark squares. The rook on a1 is also going to get involved, and we just have a fun middle game, right? So that's Blackmar. Going back to e4, what about the move of e6? My favorite gambit against e6 is b3 with the Reti Gambit, okay? Particularly online, if you just play b3 and then very quickly play bishop b2, oftentimes black will take on e4, and now the idea is to play knight c3. Look, if black wants to play knight f6, which is arguably the best move, we're going to play queen e2, castling queenside extremely quick, and then f3. Okay, notice here, this is not a usual French. In fact, if the French player accepts on e4, we're not in a French anymore. Okay, and we have a fun game there. I also see this move sometimes of f5, which kind of surprises me because I don't think it's very strategically sound. But okay, in that case, we're going to play f3, capture back with the knight. And yeah, I mean, notice here, e6 is very weak, e5 is very weak. Okay, black develops here with knight f6. We're going to play bishop c4 and queen e2 very quickly. I mean, talk about pressure on that backwards looking pawn. There was actually a master level game that continued with black playing the move of knight d5, but in that case, white just captured and played bishop e5 with check. And notice here, white has 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces developed, 1 move away from castling. And black, on the other hand, played this move of king f7. I mean, I'm taking white here any day of the week, right? So, very fun system there for white. I would say the next opening that we're going to briefly cover is what I consider to be the most underrated gambit in the game. I'm not joking. It's against the Sicilian defense, which really does throw a lot of e4 players off. But I'm a huge fan of this gambit. I play it almost every single time I go against the Sicilian, especially in quicker time controls. Even in longer time controls, I have fun with it. It's very fun. I learned it from the Ginger GM, and I hope that you like it if you haven't heard of it before. So again, it's against the Sicilian, but we're not playing a normal move, right? We're not playing out of 3. We're not going to the Grand Prix. We're not going to the Alpen. We're playing the strange move at move 2, A3. Has Solomon and the Ginger GM lost their minds? I don't know. Maybe. I hope not. But here's the idea. Next move, we're going to be playing B4, trying to trade off our B pawn for a flank pawn, right? The central pawns are on the D and E files. The flank pawns are on the C and F files, right? And here we're trying to trade off a B for a C. Okay, if we trade off this pawn, it's going to give us more freedom to take advantage of the center. And on top of that, when we prep for B4, Black could potentially, play a move like E6 or Knight C6, trying to go up a pawn, right? I'd say the most popular move I see is Knight C6. This is what I see most often, and it's my favorite move to play against, right? We play this move B4, expanding, right? And if they take, which is, again, this is what I usually see, we play C3 and D4, right? Now we're looking at moves like D5 and F4, trying to steamroll Black in this position and just gain a ton of space, right? In fact, you don't even have to play D5. You could just play F4 and Knight F3 and enjoy your huge space advantage, not to mention your already active rook, right? But usually here I do see the move D5. Black here trying to fight back, and it makes a lot of sense, getting the queen active in the center. But now again, we play an oddball move, Knight A3. Doesn't look very good, but the idea is extremely dangerous. We're looking to play Knight B5, looking to that square of C7, okay, which currently has no defenders. Notice, by the way, A6 doesn't do anything. I see this sometimes. We can still play Knight B5. Doesn't do anything at all, right? If you take us, we take the rook. That being said, against A6, the computer move is actually Knight C4, which we don't usually see in this opening, but I think the whole idea is that because the pawn has moved, B6 is extremely weak, right? Something like rook B8 is played, the bishop goes in, something like queen back to stop it, D5 pushing, forcing that knight back, move 9, Black hasn't even got one of their pieces off their starting square. That's great for us. But yeah, I mean, Knight C4 is definitely a solid option in that instance. Going back to Knight A3, I'd say the most popular move I see in this case is Knight F6, just developing. But in this case, we're going to play Knight B5, right? Threatening to jump into C7. And once this queen drops back, which it usually does, we're continuing with the move of D5, right? We're going to be covering what to do against Knight takes D5, by the way. If queen takes, we just, throw in a little powerhouse fork there with Knight C7. What about this move of Knight E5? Okay, we're playing Bishop F4 now, right? Attacking that knight, okay? You want to take on D5? Thanks for the knight, okay? You want to play Knight G6? We have Knight C7 with check, okay? The queen could capture, in which case the bishop defends. And if King D7, our bishop runs out to B5, and that's a ball game. Checkmate. Game over, right? So this knight can't move, okay? If this knight moves Knight C7, either winning a queen or bishop B5, we have a mate. That's it, okay? This move of Knight FD7 I've seen played against me, but in this case, let's just keep adding the pressure, right? Keep, adding more and more pressure and heat. And F6 is played. We now play Knight FD4, looking to play Knight E6, supporting a Knight C7 check. I mean, Black's just falling apart here. Something like Knight C5, we can just take off that pawn. Queen H5, take the pawn. We're threatening a rook. We're threatening Knight C7 winning the other rook. This game's resignable, right? But okay, going back to that move of D5, what happens if Black takes the pawn? Well, in that case, we're just going to capture back with the queen. Okay, Black takes, we have a check, powerhouse fork, capture the queen back off, and here we're +1. Okay, +1. In all honesty, at this point, I don't think White has any crazy attacking chances necessarily. I mean, we do have some cute ideas, like, for example, Knight B6, right? They can't take us because we just win the rook again. And by the way, it's, Black forgets about this all the time, the fact that we don't have this pawn here, right? Because we gave it away. this major piece got very active at move 3. Okay, that's a cute little idea that we can try. And, you know, I think another advantage is that black can't castle, right? And we can. Even though queens are off the board, it doesn't mean we can't play attacking chess. That being said, I think all the trappy stuff is over, but we're up a pawn. Okay, I'll take it. Those are, you know, some of the gambits that I've enjoyed. You know, the Scotch, the Vienna, moving into the Reti Gambit, the Blackmar-Diemer, and finally the delayed wing gambit, which I believe is the most underrated opening in all of chess because it's extremely dangerous and it's against the Sicilian, which the top players have been trying to crack for decades, right? And by the way, just to let you guys know, you know, with the move of a3, I think that the move of g6 is by far the best move that black can play, right? Magnus Carlsen actually recently played the delayed wing gambit, and he saw this move of g6, and he didn't even try to play b4 because the bishop fianchettos and our rook is attacked, right? Not a lot of fun. So in that case, he just, you know, develops a knight, drops the bishop on c4. His bishop has an escape square, and he went on to win the game, right? But probably more because he's Magnus Carlsen than the move of a3. But you get the point. So yeah, I mean, you know, a3. There's a lot of different things that you could see there. Knight c6 is my favorite. E6 honestly usually transposes into more of a regular delayed wing gambit game, but it's still a lot of fun. And okay, I mean, knight f6 sometimes happens. d5 could also be seen sometimes. But my thinking on this, which is, you know, this is what I got from the Ginger GM. Usually in the Scandinavian, they take on d5. We play knight c3, and the queen goes to a5. Who benefits, right? Usually in the Scandi, we have this position. But now we have this. Does it help white or black? I think it helps white. Because this queen can't go to its very nice safe score on a5. It's going to have to go all the way back to d8. c5 is a little loose. We're going to develop bishop b5 check ideas on the way. d4 breaks in the air. Solid game for white. All that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions about the openings that were presented. And let me know what your favorite gambits are from the white side. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've had subscribers tell me openings that I had never even heard of. And I'm thankful for you guys. You guys have really been super encouraging for me as I have, you know, been pursuing this full-time chess thing. And I love your ideas. So give me your thoughts. I'm an open book, and I look forward to hearing from you. Hey guys, wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of February in 2023. Appreciate you guys a ton. And if you haven't checked out the Patreon before, make sure to go check it out. There's a lot of Patreon exclusive benefits that you can gain, and I'd love to have you join the crew.